Mitchell of the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners. It is now 9:06 a.m., and I'm going to call today's regular meeting of the board to order. We are meeting in person this morning with commissioner, staff, and members of the public in attendance. We have a quorum with 4 commissioners present. Video of today's meeting is also being streamed live online. The link to watch today's meeting is the Housing Commission website at www.sdhc.org. To accommodate additional members of the public who may wish to participate in today's meeting, we have set up an overflow room down the hall. The live streaming video of today's meeting will also be shown in the overflow room. Speaker slips, you know the drill. Speaker slips are available for those members of the public who wish to provide comments to the board today. Our staff, Scott Marshall, will bring the slips to me as they are presented to him. And members of the public in the overflow room who wish to provide comments, there will also be provided with speaker slip opportunities. If you're in the boardroom, please submit your speaker slip to Vice President of Communications Scott Marshall, and the overflow room, submit yours to there's somebody in the staff room there, one of the staff members that's there, and they will present it to Scott. In a moment, I'm going to be proposing that agenda items 101 and 102 be placed on the consent agenda for today's meeting. I know we're going to go. Okay. And we will, members of the public may provide comments about the items on the consent agenda by submitting a speaker request form. And I have one item speaker slip for consent agenda comment already. If you want to speak in favor of any item, please use the gold colored form. If you want to speak in opposition, please use the pink colored form. And if you want to speak on a non-agenda item, please present a white form. Members of the public will have 3 minutes each to provide their comments about agenda items or non-agenda public comments. However, if a large number of people wish to provide non-agenda public comments, then we will consolidate, and collective testimony by those who support or oppose an item will be limited to no more than 15 minutes total per side. When I call your name, please step to the podium, state your name for the record, and begin making your comments. Now, let's go to the non-agenda public comments. And let's see here. Scott, I believe we have 2. So, we have 2, no further than that, so let's go ahead and start with that. And the first one up is Olivia Banks. Good morning, Ms. Banks.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Olivia Banks. I came, and it was very important for me. Today's very important. I don't know if I'm the only flood victim from the flood in January that has received. I've been found ineligible. I lost my vehicle. I lost my home. I'm a school teacher. I haven't been able to be back at work, and I was found ineligible. There was no reason why on the form that I got. I've appealed it twice. So I'm reaching out for help because I have received no help at all with anything. So that's why I'm here today. It's changed my life. Like I literally have not been back to work since the midday of the 22nd of January. So that's why I'm here today, to reach out to see why I was ineligible, which it makes no sense to me at all. And my whole life has changed. I became homeless, never been homeless a day in my life, and it's the toughest that I've ever lived. So that's why I'm here today, to reach out, and hopefully I come up here all the time. I'm up here about twice a week to try to talk to a supervisor, anybody of the higher authority, and I haven't been able to get a hold of anybody. So. Okay.
Carrie's, raise your hand, Carrie. But if you look behind you, you'll see Carrie, and Carrie will help assist you with this situation. I know there are several people who are struggling with this moment as well. So thank you, Carrie. All right. Next up on the non-agenda public comments is Joy Senyata. Joy, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Joy Senyata, District 3. Hope you had a good summer and grab the rest of the days that are left of it. Okay, here we go again. I will start out by saying I'm looking forward to our CEO President perhaps giving us an update on how we're doing with the new strategic plan, whether we have community outreach on it yet, or and if there's a specific timeline for completion, which I'm not attached to. You take whatever time what you need into the new year, of course. So a big question for you. First of all, on the governor's desk, I don't know if it's there just yet, but it will be before the 30th, hopefully. Bill SB 1047. Please look at it. This is safety on the web. And this is involving AI and the whole world, which I am very, very active now and learning about and participating. It's taking over our world now, as we know. So I want you to, do you have a staff department that is looking at the impact of AI, artificial intelligence, on the fast unfolding world of IT that has arrived now? It's here, folks. And we can't be left in the dust, because it's going to be a sad story if we do. So USA Today article, a great one on giving people cash. I know that sounds awful, but in a way, they're looking at it and it makes sense to give them cash. And our stability program was fabulous with the rent. And then another article, Oklahoma is using 3D printing to build affordable housing. And Texas has already done it. And now it's over in Oklahoma. So can we do it for shelters? I gave the article to Scott for you to take a look at. So I'm just excited, but I don't remember how much time I have left. 5 seconds, I think it is. My vision isn't as great as it used to be. But anyway, please join the world of AI. There's no stopping it. And please teach all of your public and all of your people and all of your family about it. Because we're here now and we want to meet it and join it and love it and be it. So thank you, everybody. Love to all. It's so good to be back.
It is great to have you back, Joy. Thank you for being here. All right, next up to the mic is Asma Abdi.
Hi, good morning, San Diego Housing Commission board members. I'm here speaking on behalf of PANA, the Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans, and the Mariners Cove Residents Association. I would like to thank you all for taking the time to meet with our team about the Mariners Cove redevelopment project or potential redevelopment project. And we appreciate your reassurance with the tenants and our team. I'm here to inform you all that we have been hearing from residents that the units closest to the leasing office are they're no longer renting that out to potential residents, and they are also some residents are receiving notices that they may need to vacate at short notice. And so this makes us believe that there still may be a potential redevelopment happening. And so we just wanted to inform you all about this and let you know that if there are any negotiations still happening, that residents have a seat at that table. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Obviously, Lisa, I think obviously you want to give the quick update?
No, thank you. That's surprising for us to hear as well. So we're going to follow up with you on that because we want to hear more about what the residents are seeing, because that hasn't been shared with us by the property owner.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. That is the end of the non-agenda public comment speaker slips that we have listed. And so we will now move forward with the commissioner comments. Commissioners that are present, does anybody have anything they wish to say?
Do we have Casey here?
Like looking for,
Or Jonathan?
We have John.
Jonathan's here. Okay.
Jonathan works.
Morning, Jonathan.
Good morning, Board of Commissioners. Here to fill in and provide the update on the Coordinated Shelter Intake Program. In the month of August, we received 2,351 referrals for shelter, of which we were able to accommodate 287, which equates to a 12% placement rate. Since the beginning of the fiscal year on July 1st, 2024, we've received 4,226 referrals for shelter, of which we've been able to accommodate 517, equating again to a 12% placement rate. I do want to take this opportunity to update the Board of Commissioners that as of this week, we have concluded the integration of a portion of the City of San Diego safe sleeping sites, which have provided upwards of about 405 safe sleeping sites between the O lot and the B lot. We will continue conversations with the city's Homeless Strategies and Solutions Department in the month of October to integrate the remaining portions of their safe sleeping program, as well as their bridge shelter program, Seniors Landing, operated by Serving Seniors.
Thank you. So are O lot and B lot factored into the current numbers, or will those be factored in next month?
They'll be reflected in future reports.
Okay. And I'm assuming that we don't expect them to dramatically change it because those have been fully online for a while. So they're essentially occupied already. So
There are several that are offline. There's platforms that are vacant with no tents sited, and the city is working to expeditiously site additional tents to increase the existing capacity. And I think that'll be also a future consideration in coming weeks.
So, and we don't have full awareness of occupancy levels at either O lot or 20th and B, so it's a little hard for us to tell. And my understanding is we're being provided how many are available for referral on a daily basis.
That is correct.
Rather than the whole. We don't have access to information about the whole site. We have access to what's going to be available on any given day.
Yeah, and we're working to address that with the operator to ensure we have accurate information on occupancy as well as bed availability in line with the rest of the system.
In line with the rest of the system.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be fantastic. I'm very glad that is all being connected. And as I'm thinking about how we'll interpret the information the next couple of months, I do just want to note that essentially the numbers that we've been seeing about referrals, not in a complete sense, but have already been reflecting the availability of those safe camping sites, in the sense that the people that are being referred to are other shelters, or already people who, for one reason or another, have not been placed at another site. So I think it'll be helpful to have a more complete and integrated system and a clearer picture, but I would be surprised if this meaningfully kind of changed the systemic problem of the 12% placement rate. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that's probably a fair statement to make. We'll know more as they come online, and we can certainly track referral rates and and lack of success for safe sleeping specific to brick and mortar shelter, because it's going to be important to understand if they are different. Mm-hmm. The other thing I will say is, we were seeing last winter around an 18 to 20% success rate. We're now down to about a 12%. So, Jonathan, can you, and you may not have this information because I'm asking, I didn't ask you this beforehand. Do we think it's more related to the requests increasing, or the fact that we now have intakes halted at both Golden Hall and PMC?
I think it's definitely a mixture of both. I think during the winter months, we obviously see a significant increase in interest in accessing sheltering opportunities. Over the summer months, we've definitely been impacted by the transitions of PMC and Golden Hall. Those two programs being online has significantly adversely impacted our ability to accommodate shelter referrals.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. That's incredibly helpful. And I want to also thank Chair Mitchell and Lisa and Jonathan, everybody who worked on the report that we got this week that was the summary of all available shelter, and in particular the narrative description about what has happened with all of them over the past few years, because it's always more nuanced and complicated than one would expect. And so understanding, which ones had a change in the funding stream, and so they're not being counted here, but they're still online. All those little details, I think, are really helpful for everybody to have in one place and help us understand what's happening. And also, I know that conversations have been ongoing about how we're going to be responding to the capacity that's coming offline, and I assume if not in today's report, whenever it's appropriate, you'll be sharing with us an update on what's happening there.
Yes, will be a brief update on sort of the work that's underway. We've been asked to come back to council on the 24th of, the city has been asked to come back to council on September 24th. So we've been working with HSSD and the city on that collaboration. We'll talk a little bit more about that during the CEO updates. We're not bringing an item ourselves, but we are certainly bringing information about what we've been working on. Oops.
Thank you. Yeah, and lastly, I want to thank Jonathan, too, for reminding us that we see an uptick in demand for shelter during the winter months. And I think one of the things that is concerning to me right now is that we're at essentially kind of all-time lows in terms of our ability to successfully refer, and we are at the end of summer, so there's no reason for us to believe that there will be anything other than increased demand in the coming months. So
that is a concern that we share, and we're working on, frankly, a menu and sort of host of interventions as opposed to just one single response, because we know the need's going to be high as we go into the winter months.
Thank you.
Any further comments? Thank you, Jonathan. I want to take this opportunity, I want to say I always appreciate that Vice Chair Klempner asked the right questions about, because it's always important for us to level set. I want to give staff kudos for I made the request for the memo because I was becoming more confused about our own capacity and what we had available and what was no longer available. It was important to see that memo because, simple fact, 9 days from now is the official first day of fall. And I always admit that I probably become a little more emotional about the crisis when the fall and winter arrive because it's really hard to watch people living on the streets. And so Lisa and I had a conversation about this that is important. It's important that we as a commission refocus the public as much as possible on the crisis. We spent a lot of time over the last month and a half, 2 months, talking about mega shelters. And those conversations, while important, haven't led to anybody being taken off the streets. And what always happens in the fall and winter, and Lisa's heard me say this for a few years, I always say, what's our plan as a commission? What's our plan as a community? Because the fall and winter remind us that it's not about anything other than humanity and civility. We find ways to get people off the streets, out of the weather, to protect them from what sometimes are just brutally cold and wet winters. And what Lisa and I talked about is that again, creating options for us to consider that are solutions that help protect people from November 1 to July 1. And November, it's really easy for us to slip into. It's November, it's the holiday season, and all of our woes are gone. But what Jonathan has acknowledged, and what if Casey were here, and what we all know is that the increase in demand and request happens. And Jonathan's number this time where he says, hey, we had 4,226 requests and a 12% placement. I think I know all of my fellow commissioners, we all agree that is just not acceptable. And so what are we doing? Someone asked that question, what are we doing about this in the last hearing? And I think the memo, again, sets the stage for shelter bed capacity and says we can do more. I know that Lisa has been great at working on options for the council to consider that will increase our capacity, because that's really what this is all about, is how many people can we get off the streets? And on top of the fact that we have the normal process, normal issues, we have flood victims, and to the flood victims that may be listening or may watch this, the flood happened in January, and the flood is another great example of the market problem that we have, because the number of people who are still out of their homes and can't find a place to live is also heartbreaking. And Lisa and I have talked about the fact that we have to have a community meeting to try and get everybody on the same page, because these are people that are homeless for the sheer fact of a unprecedented rainstorm that happened, and before that they were living in a home, and today they're homeless, and it's a struggle for me. And I often say that I sometimes this, Commissioner Vasquez, sometimes this role is so humbling and heartbreaking. And when I get calls from some of the flood victims who say, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go, It's hard to not have an answer. And so, Lisa, I commend you and the team because I know we're working really hard. That community meeting that we have to have is to get everybody on the same page with one mission. How do we get people back into their homes? How do we restore their lives? And, you know, I know that sometimes around this time of year, especially in election years, it's really easy for people to get lost in the politics of homelessness. This isn't about politics, folks. It's about people. It's about people who've done nothing wrong. They worked here their whole lives. They retired. They've been priced out. It's about people who were impacted by floods. And it's inappropriate for this to be about politics and mail pieces. This should always be about capacity and what we're doing to try and help people. And I think sometimes you forget. I want to say it's been great. It's been great working with the city when we're trying to create solutions. It's been great working with the county when we're working on solutions. And what this commission should realize is the reason why I mentioned November 1 to July 1 is that between now and sometime next summer, we're going to open up some properties. The Ramada will be done and hopefully should be open. And the new Marriott project that we have, that's 161 rooms, will be open. And we're going to make some progress on our own downstairs first floor for Tay Youth. So if you think about what's coming that are solutions, that's important. But we're nowhere near being done. We are nowhere near being done, and the faster we can go, the better. Because, again, the people who are going to suffer and struggle between November and May, again, it's not fair, but we have to be focused on how we create solutions. And so I know that I made this comment last meeting that we've been asked to focus on preservation and prevention. We are going to do that, but I think the options that you're developing, Lisa, are really important for everyone to pay attention to because the options are designed to create immediate impact on the people who need us now more than ever. And, for those of you who, if you happen to venture around town when it starts to rain and it starts to get cold, if you are not emotional about what you see on the streets, I can't make you be emotional about it, but I can tell you that for all of us up here, so with that, no further comments. We will go to the CEO report. And Lisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I'll go ahead and go through report and probably stop several times to kind of speak to some of the conversation we just had. All right. We are on slide 2, please. As we've just been talking about, the Housing Commission has been collaborating with the city's Homeless Strategies and Solutions Department, or HSSD, to identify potential sites and service providers for additional homeless shelters. In addition to providing you an update this morning, I will be sharing information with the council on Tuesday, the 24th. Per council direction, in late July, the city is bringing an update, on next Tuesday in my CEO update, and then per council direction, in late July, the city is bringing an update on short-term shelter strategies to the council on September 24th. We, of course, will be attending that session and may be participating in their presentation. In late June, the Housing Commission issued 2 requests for qualifications, one to identify sites that could accommodate shelter operations, and one to gauge the capacity of experienced service providers to operate shelter programs in the city. Our RFQs are open indefinitely to allow us to continue to receive responses on an ongoing basis and respond to those opportunities. Additionally, the Housing Commission's Real Estate Division has been focused on identifying potential sites for shelter operations. These sites require initial vetting by our real estate team to determine their potential feasibility before the city's staff performs more comprehensive analysis of these locations as possible shelter sites in coordination with our Homeless Housing Innovations team and city's HSSD. To date, Housing Commission and HSSD staff have visited 5 sites, one identified through the Housing Commission's RFQ process, and 4 out of 6 potential sites that the Housing Commission's real estate staff identified. An additional site that was proposed to the RFQ was too small to be feasible as a shelter site, so we did not visit that location, and I'll speak a little bit more to that. We are working as expeditiously as possible while exercising diligence and prudence in assessing options for short-term shelters, so we are bringing viable solutions forward to our policymakers. We will continue to do so and provide viable proposals to HSSD and the city administration to determine next steps as quickly as possible. And I want to speak a little more to that. As we've just shared, we are going into a winter that, if it looks even half like what last winter did, is going to be significant. And we have less opportunities to shelter and safely house people than we ever have before. We lost some of our most naturally occurring affordable housing in the January 24 floods. And not only is homelessness a result of that, displacement is too, where people are being disconnected from their communities, from their safety networks, from their faith, from their schools. Not only do we have a responsibility to figure out how to house and shelter people as a community, but as a community, we also have a responsibility to prevent displacement and make sure that people's communities get to thrive and be successful and maintain, and not see those units turned over to units that double in price compared to what they are today. Most of the folks in those units were paying less than $1,600 a month, some as low as $900 and $1,200 a month. The average two-bedroom, which is what people need, is running $2,265, and our vacancy rates are extremely low. So losing those units just highlights the conversation that we'll be having in a few minutes around preservation and how critical preservation work is. And when we talk about shelter, regardless of where you stand on the issue, the reality is one type of shelter isn't enough. So when we bring forward options that are 40 beds here, 50 beds there, another 80 beds there, those are real options. Those are options that are tailored and intended to meet specific populations. Congregate options are part of our work, and they have to be. We need that economy of scale, and some people really thrive in a campus environment. We've seen them be incredibly successful. So philosophically, as a leader in this space, I am not opposed to any one option. I believe we need a continuum of option that meets people's needs. So that if people want to be of safe sleeping, there is safe sleeping, there is an option. If people want to be in brick and mortar, there is brick and mortar, there is an option. If we have caretaker couples that depend on each other for their general daily living and can't be in a large congregate site, we have that option. That's missing today. That is not in our system. That we have seniors that are connected to the resources that best meet their needs. That if we have refugee or asylee seekers that are here legally but have zero federal benefits, we are making sure that there are resources there that understand their unique needs, that can speak their language and can get them connected to what's next, so that we are freeing up shelter beds in our system. And it isn't just about adding beds, it's also about making sure that our system is performing. And that means that we are talking publicly about where we are successful and where we are failing. We have talked about universal terms and conditions. We have talked about suspension lists. There has been a ton of work that our team has done with our providers and with community stakeholders over the past year. Those universal terms and conditions are updated right now and rolling out in October, Jonathan? October 1st, making sure that our system is low barrier and welcoming people in rather than excluding people, while balancing making sure that people are safe so people want to come in. It is a balance, and it's a fine line to walk. So when we talk about performance, understanding how safe sleeping is working, what the occupancy levels are, how many people are exiting to housing, whether the resources are in place across our system, particularly in relation to immigration needs, mental health needs, public health needs, working with our county and drawing them in is important. So when we bring forward what we've been working on, it is not going to be just one solution. It's not going to be a mega shelter. It's not going to be hotels. It's going to be a combination of all of those things, because they all have a place in this work. And I think we really have to set aside the community conversation and the naysayers about whatever you're doing is wrong. Everything we do to stand up more resources, to create more opportunities for different people to come in is right. It's about protecting people. So I appreciate very much the conversation that this board continuously has and the support that we have. It's going to be a tough year going forward. Yes, there's politics. We have tough elections ahead of us. I feel for our policymakers. I do not want to be in their chairs and their seats. That's a horrible seat to be in. But we can work through this together. We need to be open and communicating on the challenges that are ahead of us, and open to the opportunities that we also bring forward, right? Collectively, it's a collective effort.
Collaboration.
Sorry, I went off script. I will move on. And that includes what we've been doing with flood recovery, so we're going to go on to that. The next few slides provide updated data about our flood recovery program. The data is also available on our dashboard we have posted on the Housing Commission's website on our At a Glance page under the About Us menu. Again, that's our At a Glance page under the About Us menu. We want our community to be able to see how we're doing on any given day. That is updated on a weekly basis. We'll be focusing on a few key details this morning. We accepted applications for assistance from our flood recovery program through August 31st. The funding the county allocated to launch this program was based on the number of City of San Diego residents that the county verified as eligible for and participating in the county's emergency temporary lodging program, so ensuring that folks that were coming into the county program were in fact displaced by the floods. This City Council also allocated funding in this fiscal year 2025 budget to support flood assistance efforts. The 359 families who were eligible for and enrolled in the county's program as of May 23rd were eligible for assistance from our program. 91% of those families submitted applications by the deadline, which is a great response. We engaged in extensive ongoing outreach in English and Spanish to all of the 359 families to encourage them to apply. This included text messages, emails, flyer distribution, housing fairs, phone calls, and we also worked with Logan Heights Community Development Corporation to assist with outreach, as did many community-based organizations that have been working in response to this since day one. This next slide shows the 243 families who have received some form of financial assistance from the Housing Commission as of September 10th and the type of assistance they've received. Next slide. Families eligible for assistance through our program have until September 30th either to secure stable housing to receive short-term rental assistance or to choose a lump sum direct financial assistance, whichever best meets their needs. We will not have final financial outcomes until after the program closes out in late October. However, based on our reviews of applications and the funds we have dispersed so far, we are projecting that we will expend approximately $6.9 million to assist displaced families by the conclusion of our program. This includes the amounts we have dispersed for the types of payments shown on this slide, as well as short-term rental assistance we have committed to pay through March 2025. That amount is estimated at more than $583,000 as of September 10th. Our anticipated expenditures also include $660,000 for a contract with the Harvey Family Foundation, who are working diligently to restore housing that have been damaged by the floods. This will enable homeowners to rehabilitate damaged homes and will restabilize family into their homes. We have also contracted with Logan Heights Community Development Corporation and budgeted $250,000 to assist displaced families through April with light touch case management and supportive services. These are intended to assist these families as their short-term rental assistance through this program ends next spring. Our projections at this time suggest that we may have approximately $370,000 to $430,000 remaining and available after we have assisted the eligible families who applied. As I mentioned, we will not know for certain if funds remain available, the amount of funds that will remain available until late October. If funds remain, we will consult with council members on options to fully utilize any remaining available resources for eligible City of San Diego families. This slide shows the status of the applications we received as of September 10th. In addition to the 243 families who have received assistance, 42 families are pre-approved for assistance. 290 city families from the County Emergency Temporary Lodging Program reported to us that they had stable housing as of September 10th. These include families who received financial assistance from the Housing Commission, those who were pending assistance, and families who did not apply for assistance but spoke to us during our outreach efforts. We anticipate receiving additional housing status updates from remaining families at the time of financial assistance awards. Our flood recovery program has also provided housing search assistance for eligible displaced families who may have needed to find a new home. The data for this component of our program is shown on this slide and also appears on our website. Next slide. Here you can see the outcomes through September 10th for the Housing Restoration Assistance Program, contracted with Harvey Family Foundation. We know the past several months since the floods have been very difficult for the affected families. Our staff has worked diligently to assist these families through our initial emergency short-term lodging efforts before the county's program started, and more recently through this flood recovery program. We thank the board for the support of these families. It has been a trying time for all of them, but the quick response that the board made early in January, along with City Council support, has made this an intensive and effective effort in supporting these families. Next slide. I also have an update for you on our affordable housing preservation efforts. In July, we began stakeholder meetings to receive feedback on a draft affordable housing preservation ordinance that will be going to the council for consideration. These stakeholder meetings are continuing with dates scheduled through October. We're also holding a webinar for members of the public to provide input. That will occur October 15th at 6 p.m. The details on how to participate in the webinar, including the Zoom link, are available on our website at www.sdhc.org. We have identified more than 5,600 housing units in the city with affordability restrictions set to expire by 2034. Of those, 1,368 units are considered high priority because it is highly likely that their affordability restrictions will end. The other units are considered medium or low priority because of factors that suggest their affordability is more likely to continue based on the reasons shown on this slide. The provisions of the draft ordinance seek to ensure housing opportunities for very low, and moderate income households are not permanently removed from the housing stock. The draft ordinance is intended to expand on the rights granted through state law. The creation of an affordable housing preservation ordinance was one of 7 actions the City Council approved in October 2020 to implement a strategy for affordable housing preservation in the city. It's certainly going to be one of the key areas we focus on as we develop our next strategic plan, and I will follow up with you, Joy, and give you some timelines. Preserving the natural affordable housing and the deed-restricted housing in our community is going to be critical over the next 10 to 20 years. If we do not preserve what we have, all of our efforts to increase and create new affordable housing will give us no net increase, and that's just not acceptable. It's a huge challenge. It's an area that our policy team has been very focused on at state and federal levels and will continue to be with our consultants, Lighthouse Public Affairs. It's one of the biggest issues in our community. We know we need to create more housing, but if we don't preserve what we've got and make sure that it is quality, habitable housing that is affordable to the people who need it, our efforts will be in vain. Next slide, please. In my report to you in January, I shared information about the launch of a new program to train young adults with low income for careers in the healthcare field. The Healthcare Career Catalyst for Young Adult Programs is an initiative in our Achievement Academy. A 2-year, $604,000 grant from Prebys Foundation funds the program. It provides certified medical assistance training and life skills support at no cost to eligible young adults in the city between the ages of 18 and 26 who have low income. The Housing Commission's Achievement Academy partners with the Western Medical Training Center and the International Rescue Committee's Center for Economic Opportunity on this program. Last month, it was my pleasure to attend a graduation where the first 17 students to complete the program celebrated their graduation at our offices. It was really great to see the students there, the excitement, the families that were there to support them. It was a great experience. And just kudos to our Achievement Academy team, to Azza Seneval-Adolid, to Stephanie Murphy and their team. What I also got to see when I was there is the true connection between our team members and our students and how involved they are on an ongoing process and the students' success. It was really heartwarming. So congratulations again to these students who are now certified medical assistants. They are on their way to a life-changing and meaningful career where their new skill sets and their kindness will positively impact people's lives. Finally, I wanted to give you an update on Presidio Palms. Last month, the Housing Commission completed our acquisition of the property we now refer to as Presidio Palms, which was a previous residence in the Hotel Circle area. Extended stay hotel. Converting into 161 affordable housing rental units with supportive services for people experiencing homelessness. We anticipate rehabilitation of the property will begin in late October, and will be completed for residents to move in by spring of next year. This is practically move-in ready. That's a very tight timeline for rehab, so kudos to the team on that. Presidio Palms is one of the properties for which the state awarded Home Key funds to support the creation of these housing units. Just as a reminder, since Home Key started in 2020, the state has awarded more than $105 million to the Housing Commission collaborations with the city and the county to create more than 600 affordable housing units for people experiencing homelessness. With the purchase of Presidio Palms, more than 550 of those units are at properties the Housing Commission now owns. As a reminder, this also takes voucher commitments on our part. We continue to lead the state as one of the housing authorities in the state that has committed a larger percentage of our vouchers to homelessness than any other. It is great to see that Home Key Plus and Prop 1 funding is also coming down, but it does put us in a new situation of challenge in understanding that our voucher resources are limited. They are currently overextended, and we are hoping to see money and operating subsidies coming from the state in future allocations to also help continue to bring these types of properties online. It's going to be challenging as we move forward. Again, thank you to the board and the council for our support, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Lisa. Great report, and I want to take this opportunity to say again, thank you to the city and the county on the partnership for the last two home key rounds. That this presented with an opportunity. I think that we should all be proud of the fact that we turned that opportunity into 600 rooms. That many will come online next year and be an enhancement to the structure that is so vital to this community. So, all right. Next is the approval of the minutes from the meeting of July 19th, 2024. No speaker slips have been submitted on the minutes. So, commissioners, any changes to the minutes, or do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Commissioner. We have a motion in a second. All right. Did you get that, Tony and Ryan? Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. All right. Next, we'll move to the consent agenda. And we do have one speaker slip for the consent agenda, and that is Joy Senyata. Joy, the mic is yours.
Joy Senyata, District 3. Chair, excuse me, I'll go off point just a few seconds. The way you felt this morning was very beautiful. And I could feel the energy in this room, which was very beautiful. Take that energy out into the community and just feel it and show it. And that's a huge step to helping. So I just loved what was just done in this room. Thank you so much. Okay, item 100. Yes, award the contract for $336,000 to services related to physical needs. 150 properties, 2,400 units, average age 45 years old. Excuse me, that's the properties. And in the FY25 SDHC budget, that's good news, it's in there. Funding uses approved by this action will be allocated as follows. Local funds, I didn't understand, I would have appreciated clarity on the words local funds. I wasn't sure what that was. $370,000, what are they? And then quote these words, believe in transparency. So with the assessment results that will be coming up much later as you get the work done, so critical, thank you. I'd like to have that data on, how it's going to fit into the budget and the data on what you found. I think that's going to be so important and brave, very brave and bold of you to share that with the community. So thank you, Partner in Engineering and Science Incorporated, for your commitment to equity and inclusion. That was really good. Those were good words. So love to all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joy. We don't have any additional speaker. We do. That was on, I know. Yes, I know. No additional speaker slips on the consent agenda. And so with that concludes public comment period for the consent agenda. Commissioners, any comments on the consent agenda, or do I have a motion? A motion by Johanna, second by Tony. Any additional comments? All right, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries unanimously. We will now move on to the first item for discussion. That is the item 100 on the agenda, and we'll take public comments after the staff presentation. Vice President of Asset Management, Emmanuel Arellano, will present this item. He's smiling as always. He's always got something happy to say to us, so. All right, the floor is yours.
I'm sorry, Chair, I blew it.
Joy, I knew what you were doing. Don't worry about it. You're good. You're safe with me. That's fine. If you want to come back up and say it again, you can. I'll bring it up after this.
No, so I'll skip on consent.
Okay.
It's all done, but you know where
I know exactly where you are, Joy. You're good.
I was in
Okay.
the flow of something else,
No problem.
so anyway, I apologize.
See, you already have some support, Emmanuel. So go. Get rolling.
Oh, God.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Physical needs assessments, or P&As, are a real estate industry-wide best practice and accepted tool for effective real estate operations management to determine and manage the portfolio's short and long-term capital needs. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, recommends conducting a P&A every 5 years on real estate held long-term. The Housing Commission last performed a P&A on its portfolio in fiscal year 2019. Before that, a P&A was performed in fiscal year 2014. The Housing Commission has a diverse real estate portfolio with small, medium, and large properties. Small properties are 1 to 18 units, medium properties are 20 to 80 units, and large properties are 81 units or more. Unit sizes range from single-room occupancy, or SRO, to multi-bedroom single-family homes. Our properties are located almost across the entire city of San Diego. The Housing Commission plans to perform a P&A across 150 properties totaling 2,400 units. This consists of 8 public housing units totaling 8 public housing sites totaling 189 units, and 142 affordable housing sites totaling 2,211 units. Our 2 most recent acquisitions, Pacific Village and Presidio Palms, are the only residential properties in the portfolio not included in this assessment. P&As were recently completed for those 2 properties as part of the acquisition due diligence process, and those sites are being rehabilitated. The P&A will assess each Housing Commission's property's current physical condition, identify capital needs, and project replacement reserve needs over a 20-year period. This assessment data will allow the Housing Commission to make long-term financial and strategic planning decisions regarding the preservation of existing real estate assets. The average age of our properties in our very diverse real estate portfolio is 45 years old. These properties have existing needs that involve repairs and replacement costs beyond ordinary maintenance. The P&A will enable the Housing Commission to accurately identify and address the most urgent needs first amid ongoing funding limitations. On July 2, 2024, the Housing Commission issued a request for proposals, or RFP, for this service, seeking well-qualified contractors to provide and meet the Housing Commission's P&A needs. The RFP was posted and made available for download on Planet Bid's website through the Housing Commission's portal. Approximately 250 registered contractors were notified. During the bid period, a total of 9 bid packages were downloaded by interested parties. At RFP closing on July 30, 2024, the Housing Commission received 4 proposal responses. The RFP evaluation panel evaluated, scored, and ranked the proposals based on the criteria shown on this slide. At the conclusion of the evaluation process, Partner Engineering and Science Inc. was rated and ranked as the most qualified and responded to the RFP. Partner is a reputable company who has been in business since 2007. The proposed funding sources and uses approved by these actions were included in the Housing Authority approved fiscal year 2025 Housing Commission budget. Staff recommends that the Housing Commission Board approve the actions detailed in the staff report and shown on this slide. This concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Joy, again, if you want to come back up, you can. You're good? All right. Joy's good, so we don't have any further speaker slips on this item. And we now open it up to commissioners.
Thank you for that. I was wondering, there's a comment made about there's a 20-year plan. Can you talk about that a little bit? And then how do we prioritize that sort of stuff?
Sure. So as part of the scope of this request is the vendor partners will give us a 20-year capital replacement schedule for each property, anticipating what the capital needs will be between now and the next 20 years for replacement of major building system, plumbing, water heaters, roofing, pavement, so on and so forth. And the way we use that to prioritize, starting with life and safety, of course, plumbing is a big one for us. Water heater is a big one. So anticipate when the end of the useful life of the existing components will be, and proactively addressing those needs before they fail. We want to change the water heaters before they start breaking, but also at the end of their useful life to not, forego any usage of those.
Does this include, when I read it originally, I thought about ADA compliance. Is that part of that as well? And if you can talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So the vendor's expected to inspect 100% of our ADA units within the portfolio to confirm that they're still up to code. And if there's something that needs to be addressed or changed, that will be noted within the report.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
What percentage of our units are ADA compliance, or is that a particular percentage, or all of it? How does that?
So typically, ballpark is about at 3% of our units throughout the portfolio are ADA compliant. Mm-hmm.
All right. Vice Chair Klempner?
Appreciate those questions from Commissioner Hester. I don't have any questions, but I did sort of want to contextualize this and how important this is. And, this is not an insignificant cost, but I think when we think about the number of properties we're dealing with, the complexity of the properties, this is such a high priority, and the strategic planning process has come up. Joy asked about that. I'll sort of fold in here that we have an RFP that is wrapping up shortly for the outside consultants that will be helping us with that. But I think that the long-term maintenance of our properties is a very important part of our long-term strategic plan. And there's a few things on my in my time here that have highlighted this for me. One, it must have been 4 or 5 years ago now, but we had a very substantial cost related to one of our historic properties and the plumbing needs of it. And there was a very robust conversation among the commissioners at the time that went back to well before I was on this board. And essentially, at least some of the people who had been involved with the maintenance on that building back when it was acquired were surprised at the amount of investment that was being required eight years on. And it's very, plumbing is not an optional cost. So obviously that was approved, but knowing what these costs are long-term and having a schedule for how we're going to meet them is so critical to the mission as a whole. These are not optional expenses, and when they arise unexpectedly, it forces us to essentially borrow against other priorities of the organization. The second thing that I want to point out is that some of the funds that would otherwise be going towards maintenance were what were used in the short term in the aftermath of the flooding earlier this year. And, I raised the issue then, and I think this is the appropriate time to raise it again, that having a very clear, documented priority and schedule and estimate of the costs makes those funds real and makes it harder for them to be, ambiguously considered and repurposed for other things. This is a critical part of the mission, and having it well spelled out by independent experts, I think prevents it from being viewed as, more or less like a fund that can be raided whenever we have something come up that is needed for it. We need to prioritize those other needs in their own right. The city, the region, the county needs to have adequate disaster response. Maintenance funds cannot be on the table for that purpose. And I think the more specific we are on how and why those maintenance funds are needed, the better we can help the policymakers understand that that they are required. So this is incredibly important. It is well worth the investment. I'm very glad that we're taking this open and transparent and long-term view on how we're going to handle maintenance. So thank you, and I'd be happy to make the motion.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, I just have one question. In regards to the ADA and 3%, are we saying that 3% of our properties are only compliant? And what is the number of people that would need ADA assistance? And where do we stack up in relationship?
Right, so all of our properties are compliant. The code requires 3% of the units across the 3% of the units across the portfolio to be ADA accessible. So that's about what we have. So we're in full compliance within the code. As far as the need for ADA units, I don't have that in front of me. That's something we can definitely survey.
Thank you.
I will say, I think it's fair to make some assumptions that the state requirements have some alignment in what general public needs are, but that doesn't mean that there's someone that might have minor mobility issues that doesn't need an ADA unit but needs grab bars. There's a process to submit a reasonable accommodation to get the resources that they need to be successful in whatever unit they're in, because not everybody's going to need a roll-in shower, for instance, right? So there's a process by which they can submit requests to property management.
Okay, so basically if someone was in any ADA assistance, they would just submit a request to that property manager and we would implement that.
Right. I mean, there are some things where it might be that it's better to try to identify an ADA unit to move them into because their needs have significantly changed, but there's a lot of minor needs that people have all the time that we work through an accommodation process to see how we meet them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think good line of questions there, because I think ADA is a growing definition. I think there's a misperception that ADA is only a set number of things, but as Lisa mentioned, I mean, if you have an accommodation that you need, you submit it, then that's what we're going to try and adhere to. I think that's the beauty of the organization, is that we adjust. And when we were doing the tour of one of the apartments, Johanna and I were over at one of our most recent apartments, Kearny Mesa, and I was amazed that we had 2-story extended stay units. And it just reminded me that if you have mobility challenges, that's not going to be a good unit for you. And so I think that the team, the staff has done a great job of trying to be accommodating, so I give them credit. I would just make one statement before I know we have a motion by Vice Chair Klempner. When we're looking at modernizing the units, and I agree with Vice Chair on this, is that having a schedule, we need to look at every opportunity we have for getting money that's available, and I'll give you a good example. We're right now going through the bill sitting on the governor's desk around home key and the energy uses, but there's also a bunch of money at the commission that we either, if we're not eligible for it, we need to think about legislatively how we become eligible for all the upgrades that we need to do regarding lighting, energy efficiency. These are all things that we should be taking advantage of, and if there isn't a direct link to those buckets, then we need to try and create one legislatively, because it makes sense that if the individuals that we're housing in our units were living alone in a unit, they would be eligible for access to those buckets. So there's nothing that should prohibit us from going in and taking advantage of the money that's sitting there in a state bucket at the PUC, and using that money to offset some of our costs, and to try and again, it's not just about providing a safe space, it's about trying to provide the most efficient safe space as possible. So that's a benefit for our residents and for the commission, and again, helps us offset some of our costs. Okay. All right, we have a motion.
Sorry. Next time I'll just jump in front of him. No, I mean, I want to say that's one of the values of a P&A, right? And having a 20-year plan is that you have identified exactly what those needs are. So when you have a menu of what those needs are and you have a prioritization of those needs, it then helps you document and prove when you're going after funding how you're going to fund it and what it matters. And I think something that's interesting, and I've had a little conversations with the development team around this, is more and more we are seeing, our Surgeon General at a federal level talk about the impacts of housing on health. And there's a lot of connections to what housing looks like, what it feels like, how it's developed, what's around it, impacts health outcomes. So I believe that we are starting to see and are going to continue to see new opportunities from a funding standpoint in less typical environments, environmental protection agencies, health and human service agency. There are going to be opportunities to look to fund what are essentially rehab activities through different funding sources as we as a community and as a nation start to understand that all of these things impact how successful we are and impact our health indicators, right? So I think there's opportunities there, and that's something that this PNA will also help us do. And then just back to Commissioner Klumpner's point, this conversation around, deferred maintenance is something every affordable housing owner talks about all the time. But there's deferred maintenance that is not high on the list, and there's deferred maintenance that, if it turns into water intrusion, destroys everything. And we know that water intrusion, whether it's roofs, whether it's windows, whether it's your water heaters, whether it's your plumbing, are the most expensive costs that you see in environment. So this helps us stay ahead of that, so it costs us less rather than more. But we also need to make sure that, we have those property operating reserves and those maintenance reserves when we need them and things do go wrong, whether it's a storm or whether it's just an unanticipated water main break. Appreciate the board's support on that. It's really critical.
All right. Any further comments? All right, we have a motion. We don't have, Commissioner Hester, yes.
I appreciate what Lisa just said about this process allows us to define in a much clearer way the needs, and Chair Mitchell's comment about things that we do to upgrade for energy efficiencies, such as the windows and whatnot. And I remember walking in one of the units that a tenant voluntarily invited us in, and I went upstairs, and she and her daughter had created this space that's lovely and beautiful and artsy. And I can't help but want to wonder, are we considering solar panels to our units in terms of doing energy savings?
Yes, so part of the scope of the PNA will involve sustainability improvements and upgrades. So yeah, solar is definitely something that would be considered. A lot of our properties are really small in size, so that creates a challenge as far as roof space of putting a solar. So the vast majority of our properties are in the small category between 1 to 18 units. So we have a lot of smaller properties, so it's a challenge. But definitely that's something that they looked at every single opportunity.
Yeah, I think that the legislative fix, just looking ahead, is there are going to be smaller technologies that become available, fuel cells. There are a lot of our properties that would be eligible for a fuel cell. They're small in size, but they can provide the adequate power, especially during the hottest days. So it's getting hotter, and I think we need to prepare for that. And that's why I said we shouldn't be leaving any of the state money on the table that is sitting in a bucket. And I think that the reason why this occurred to me is when we ran into the issue around the energy cost, we realized the regs were written so long ago that nobody ever anticipated that housing commissions or housing authorities were actually going to be thinking about the residents and how we could best improve their units and their lives by the updates. So we just need to think about how we do that. All right, so we have a motion. Did we get a second? We did get a second. Okay, we have a second. Let me look left again, make sure Lisa, nobody else? All right, we're good. You want to check outside, make sure everybody up there? Okay, all right.
Actually, I've got Commissioner Cushman on.
Yeah. It's calling from Hawaii. All right. Okay, with that being said, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Good discussion. All right, now we're moving on to, we have two items left. We have item 103, and this is the Housing Commission's 2025 State and Federal Advocacy and Legislative Engagement Guide. We have one speaker slip for this that we'll take after the presentation, and then we will move on. So this item will be presented today. I forgot, Molly did give me this heads up, so we are going to have Thomas DeFranco, and I think I know you, sir. Michael. Okay, you good?
I'll just jump in real quick and just say Thomas is new, our Director of Policy at the Commission. Welcome, Thomas.
Welcome,
and he's
Thomas.
just been delivering fantastic work since the day you got here. So glad to have you up in front of us.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thomas, it's your first time at the mic, man. Make sure you get it right.
Let's do it. Let's do it. All right.
Generally, when we make our mistakes, we acknowledge them, laugh about them, move on. That's the standard practice, just in case you weren't aware
Thank
of
you.
that.
Thank you.
Usually.
Good morning, Chair Mitchell and Board. My name is Thomas DeFranco, and I am the Housing Commission's Director of Policy. Today, I'll be presenting on the 2025 Advocacy and Legislative Engagement Guide. This is the third year that the Housing Commission has created an Advocacy and Legislative Engagement Guide for the Board's consideration as aligned with our strategic plan. In today's presentation, I'll discuss the 2025 guide and how advocacy-related decisions are made. I'll then summarize this past year's state and federal advocacy efforts, provide an overview of the legislative activities for 2024, and identify upcoming legislative themes that will guide our work in 2025. During the year, the Housing Commission policy team tracks and analyzes affordable housing and homelessness policy and legislation at the state and federal level. This document is a guide for the Housing Commission's legislative priorities and advocacy efforts. It allows for flexibility if unanticipated issues arise during the year, and if a proposal is introduced that is not outlined in the current engagement guide but falls within the Housing Commission's strategic plan priority areas, the policy team reviews the issue with senior leadership for guidance. We also will engage directly with policymakers and local stakeholders, including the city's government affairs team, on pending regulations, legislation, and funding appropriations. The Housing Commission works to advance policies consistent with our vision, mission, purpose, core values, and strategic priorities as defined in the strategic plan for FY22 through 24. The 2025 Advocacy and Legislative Engagement Guide supports the Housing Commission's strategic priority area of advocacy, communication, and public engagement. This year, we are focusing on 4 key policy priorities: homelessness prevention and best practices in addressing homelessness, rental assistance, preservation of affordable housing, and production of affordable housing. Here with me today are Holly Framini de Jesus and Michael Gunning from Lighthouse Public Affairs, our Sacramento legislative consulting team. Holly is a partner with the firm and has more than 20 years of experience advocating on behalf of her clients. And Michael is Lighthouse's Chief Strategy Officer and was appointed by 2 of California's governors to serve on California's Housing Finance Agency. I'll hand it over to them.
This one.
Mr. Gunning.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas. Chair Mitchell, commissioners, certainly glad to be here. What a difference a year makes, right? $100 million surplus, handing out home key projects, financing, not anymore. As you look at that calendar, I think we all recognize January 1st that the governors announced an $85 billion deficit, from $100 billion to $85 billion deficit. They took early action to cut that to 55, but I share that to say the whole budget deficit hangs over and hung over that calendar as we look at that August 31st recess. And so if you think about the process, everything was focused on the budget deficit and how to make do with less. And even with some of the bills that would change the threshold for passing bonds, I think some of us knew that the Business Roundtable had a measure out there that would limit local government's ability to raise revenue. Holly will touch on that a little bit later. But you should really appreciate through the year the deficit impacted everything. And then, of course, a little thing called elections that happens on November 5th also colors everything because folks are running for office and like to give away things when they can in an election year. That being said, you've heard Holly, 20 years. I think I may have that and some change. We've never seen a session like this that ended the way it did. And Mitch, you may chime in here, but we accustomed to staying up late on Friday to 3 in the morning on Saturday, but not starting on a Saturday and coming into session. So because 31st was the deadline to end all the bills, we had to come in on a Saturday. Interestingly, I got a text at 7:30 from my buddy who said, "Hey man, the speaker's on the golf course here playing golf." And I was like, "Oh, we should have been doing work, Mr. Speaker."
I can say right now that my better half in my family did not appreciate me watching the legislative session during dinner, but it went so late.
Yeah.
And at 11:30 p.m., she was like, "You're still watching this?" I'm like,
watching it.
"Yes, I am." So, yeah, but yes.
In this case, the action really happened at 11:30, so it was really good. But just to sort of touch on some of the highlights here as we look at the calendar, it used to be the Big Five, it's now the Big Three. The governor, the speaker, and the pro tem. Republicans pretty much eliminated from the process. Chair Klumner, you appreciate that. The issues, and Joy, you were right, AI is top of the list in Sacramento. Warehouses, where we locate our warehouses. PAGA reform, the private attorney general action, that was a big deal that was settled, which allows individuals to file suit. Retail theft was big this year. You know, we had the initiative on the ballot this year, the pushback from the legislature on retail theft. Housing, as always, particularly the lack of, it feels like the governor cuts housing money before anything else, and we got to fight to get it back. And then, of course, underneath this is insurance, my background, insurance. It's no longer just a wildfire rural area. It's impacting everywhere now. Molly has shared with us the impact to you as a housing authority, the cost of insurance and the availability of insurance as insurance companies raise rates and pull out of the state. I think for this year, I think you all appreciate that the Capitol now is just the floor of the Senate and the Assembly, and we have to stand around in the rotunda. We don't have the halls to walk anymore. So the rotunda this year, as Chair Mitchell outlined, was packed with action. The reparations bill was up, and there were folks in the hallway yelling the whole, I think, 6 hours on Saturday, waiting for those bills to come up. But why don't we jump in, Holly, and with that, move to the next slide, which will talk a little bit about the budget recap.
So I think the most important thing to stress, and again, great to see you all a year later, and a big difference a year makes, and why we're starting with a budget recap is because that really was always the 800-pound gorilla in the room over every piece of legislation that passed or failed, its fiscal impacts, and it really was always what was considered. But this budget year, and as you can imagine, closing 55, I think, at the end of the June, by the time they took a lot of early actions were even made in February and March, because in January, the projections were so dire because the capital gains taxes and those projections were so low that they took even early actions on last year's budget. They started removing funding. So we were worried and jumped into high gear to protect some of those budget items that came to the commission at the end of the year that we were celebrating a year ago. We had to jump into high gear to make sure some of those funds were protected and not taken. So fortunately, none of those clawbacks, which were everything was on the table this year, fortunately, those funds from a year ago were still protected, are still, as of now, still coming to the commission. But there's a lot of articles that talks about winners and losers in the state budget. Overall, affordable housing were losers. We had a $1.1 billion in cuts to affordable housing programs. That's huge and unprecedented for the state. If you want to call it a winner, folks some journalists like to call it the winner was homelessness, because those cuts that were proposed by the governor in January were fortunately restored. For the HAP program and for the encampment cleanup program, those funds were fortunately proposed to be eliminated in January. It was considered a win to just have them restored, but no new funding was proposed from last year, and no increases. But massive cuts, $1.1 billion to affordable housing. I know we can call it a winner if you're a tax credit recipient or if you're a multifamily home grant recipient. Fortunately, again, those programs were eliminated in the January budget, but by June, fortunately, some of those funds were restored. But some major losers were all the programs related to preservation And our morning presentation was about preservation. So that is a priority for us moving forward to ensure no more cuts. I mean, those programs were eliminated in the budget. Everything related to preservation and the home ownership programs, the low-income homebuyer programs and the Cal Home program, which is the only program in the state that provides a new unit for a low-income homeowner, zeroed out in the budget this year. So it's really important and very, I think, sobering to see the cuts this year, and we don't really see an end in sight in future years. So I think we have to buckle up and not expect new funds coming from the state, but that has been, again, an overarching theme that I think we will continue to see as dramatic cuts, and hopefully it can't get much worse, but the budget projections, unfortunately, looking forward, do not look like they're getting any better.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Okay, just to touch on this, we talked earlier, as an election year, I think you should appreciate we're having a wholesale change of the legislature. We now have 12-year term limits, and so the class that was brought in 2012 is now leaving, although COVID took out some of them. But what this means is a whole new host of new folks coming into our legislature that will need education and need to appreciate all of the dynamics, particularly around public housing authorities and particularly San Diego Housing Commission.
Mr. Gunning, I would say that to put a number on that for our Housing Commission staff and family here, 60 of the 120 members that when we gavel in January will have 2 years or less experience in the Capitol.
Yeah. I choose to believe that's an opportunity. I think we can educate them about the good works we do here and hopefully help, as Holly said, to find money for programs. Also, it should not, the dynamics between Speaker Rivas and Pro Tem McGuire. Rivas hopefully will be there a little longer. Pro Tem McGuire could be losing this seat because he's termed out next year, so whether he makes it through 25, I think will be a dynamic. He's supposed to be running for insurance commissioner, and we'll talk a little bit about some legislation on insurance. But it is going to impact next year how and what gets done in the legislature with the new membership there. This past year, one of the exciting things I think we saw was the Attorney General Rob Bonta weighing in on housing. You know, he was a co-sponsor with Buffy Wicks on AB 1893. He's suing cities. My city of Elk Grove was my hometown, not my hometown, where I live, was sued because of not allowing affordable units in the city. So you're really seeing beefing up, stepping up by the Attorney General and others, particularly the governor, we all know, in trying to enforce on housing. A number of the bills dealing with housing elements, regional housing needs, the RHNA numbers, making sure holding cities' feet to the fire in terms of their production. But one of the more interesting things was the bond measures, particularly BAFA, Holly. You were involved in that.
The bond measure. So the bond measures, again, the housing bond, I think so many folks were hopeful when it was originally introduced a year ago, the beginning of a 2-year session by Assemblymember Wicks. And so many programs and future new funds were based on that measure passing. And come June, as Michael mentioned earlier, with the CRT and the ballot initiative and all these ACA 1, ACA 10, all these attempts to try to make it easier to pass bonds, with those sitting on the ballot, there was a deal that was struck to not allow the housing bond to move forward at the state level, that the focus would shift on new money for housing programs locally to be local bond measures and local revenue attempts. So at that moment in time in June, there was full steam ahead on the BAFA measure. They were, collecting signatures and raising money to get that certified, as well as La Casa, the Los Angeles Housing Solutions Agency. They too had qualified a measure in June to be on their local ballot for a sales tax measure. And so ultimately, again, that state housing bond died in its track. 2 other bonds, though, moved forward, which was a school bond as well as a climate bond had moved forward. But that state housing bonds, there was kind of a decision that was made by leadership. Let's just see what happens with the regional efforts first. Well, since then, we're now in just the end of August, early September, the BAFA measure, as quickly as it qualified for the ballot, was pulled from the ballot. So there's no regional housing measure now moving forward in the Bay Area. And the only one moving forward now is the one in Los Angeles, which again is a sales tax. It's not a bond. So now I think next year we will see another shift back to Sacramento, especially with the fate of Prop 5, which changes that threshold to unpassed bonds, actually not unknown and uncertain what the outcome that will be in November. So I think we will see, and I can predict that we may be back in Sacramento discussing another potential statewide bond, because even those local bond measures, politically, we know that only a few regions in the state could ever even pass them with the lower threshold. There's still areas of the state that will not could never pass a bond for housing. But before we move off the slide, one other major theme I wanted to just mention on those cleanup bills, and I think this is important since you mentioned Republicans being irrelevant on maybe budget negotiations, but they are not irrelevant when it comes to housing production bills and cleanup legislation. And I'm just going to mention this because our leader of the minority party in the Senate is Brian Jones down from San Diego, and Kelly Sayardo, a senator, is not too far from here, represents Temecula. But for their votes and their colleagues' votes during the session, that bill sponsored by the Attorney General would not have passed and made it to the governor's desk. There's quite a few bills when it comes to production. It's not a partisan issue when it comes to housing production. It's one area which I love to work on because it's bipartisan, it's very local. They look at what it means for their community. So all of the production bills, I just wanted to add that the Republicans are extremely relevant in both houses when it comes to passing affordable housing and market rate housing production bills.
In fact, one of the best moments was when Senator Dolly came out to us and said he had just talked to Senator Alvarado Gil, who, of course, was the Democrat that became a Republican. And Brian said, hey, I'm whipping votes for you there in the session on the housing bill. So you're right. Thank you, Holly. All right. Go ahead. You're up. Yep.
So sponsored bills, I think that's an interesting term because sponsored bills are sometimes truly sponsored by an organization, and sometimes they're by an author. So this was what we consider a co-sponsored bill. It was actually an idea that came from Chris Ward, Assemblymember Chris Ward, who now also, what a difference a year makes, a year ago was not the chair of the Housing Committee, and he now is the chair of the Housing Committee. So any bill with Chris Ward's name on it is definitely taken a bit more seriously than some of the other bills that get introduced by his colleagues. So he came up with this idea about identifying an underutilized property, the Hillcrest DMV site, which I think many people in this room and watching are familiar with, of how we could maximize and make sure that a piece of legislation that's been on the books 20 years ago to try to use this property for housing has not been used. So even though this bill did not make it to the governor's desk, to make a very long story short, it didn't make it to the governor's desk because it does require approval. It is a state-owned site, which complicates things. Many state agencies have opinions when it comes to reutilizing or building anything on state property. But what this bill did was generated a new conversation, not just about surplus properties or excess properties, but looking at underutilized government-owned lands that could be retained for government use, but how we can maximize them to build more affordable housing. So again, this bill did not make it to the governor, but it really incited a new conversation that not only is this one underutilized site, but how we can work on this site, but also Chris Ward's going to be leading a broader conversation with the state on other underutilized sites.
Great. Same, or are we moving to which one? Yeah, Peachy North. I was just going to say that. Commissioner Mitchell, thank you for this wonderful idea, AB 2672, by Chair of the Senate Energy Committee. Really, it's a program that benefits other low-income residents throughout the state, and why not allow the residents of our housing authority to benefit from it as well. What was fun is when we took it to the chair, she immediately said, oh yeah, why not? And added it in and put it in and added it to the bill. So it does require the CARE program to now work for housing authorities and home key administrated facilities. So I would share with the rest of you that if there's other ideas like that we're certainly open to bring them forward and make them come into life.
I think we already heard a few this morning, so we appreciate that.
We got one already.
The third bill on this list, why we're highlighting, is a lot of time and attention was spent in negotiating amendments. We weren't a co-sponsor, but we were opposed to this bill unless amended. We wanted to make it clear that the monitoring fees and the monitoring activities were truly duplicative in nature. And we wanted to make sure that the work of the staff at the commission to ensure compliance, to protect tenants from rent hikes, and to just ensure there was no fraud. We have a lot of rules in place to ensure that the units remain affordable. And so that's why we were able to negotiate some amendments we're proud of in there to remove our opposition as the bill is now on the governor's desk for signature.
All right, 6:53. Well, you try and you try to beat up a bill and you work hard and you try to get it to die, but sometimes, particularly, there's a feeling for the member. In this case, Assembly Member Reyes, who's a former majority leader, is now running for the Senate. And so despite all the work we had on this HUD voucher bill, and of course this is requiring, sometimes being the best, folks want to see what you're doing, and this is, of course, requiring the commission to report on its voucher program. And we were concerned its impact on HUD funding. We worked so hard on this in the Senate, the bill was basically gutted and amended to a reporting bill. Just reporting and working with HCD, it was able to pass out of the Assembly and now is on the governor's desk as a reporting bill. We do have a veto letter in on it, and we've actually, working through CAHA, encouraged other housing authorities, like Oakland submitted a letter as well. So we're thinking the cost associated with this, we can still get it, but it's one of those that we think we knocked it down enough to at least lessen the impact.
Hey, Michael and Holly, what I want to do is I want to make sure that we
Yes.
leave enough. I think the robust time of the remaining time spent would be around the outlook for the session, the goals.
Yes.
And so everybody read about the next page of bills. So can we move to that part? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Back to you.
Okay. Really, as we start to look at next year, and the budget concerns are not going away. It's still going to be dismal times for the budget. We'll have to see what the number looks like when they come back in January. And actually, they come back December 2nd because it is a new year. But we think it's going to be a theme next year as well. You also have the dynamic of the elections. We're going to have new leadership, new committee chairs. Chair Mitchell, as you alluded to, folks with barely 2 years' experience, not knowing what's going on. It's going to be difficult. But again, I think it represents an opportunity to educate and help folks appreciate how good the commission does its job. For us, as we look at this, we think the key themes are production, preservation. We've already talked about preservation, Chair Mitchell, including how can we densify some, increase the density on some of our projects here. Really covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And I touched a little bit on insurance reforms. There was an insurance reform bill this year, but McGuire, because he's running for insurance commissioner and it wasn't his name on it, held it in the Senate, so it didn't make it out. This was a bill by David Alvarez from here to look at the FAIR Plan. This insurance issue, the commissioner is supposed to come up with a plan by the end of this year in December, but it's not I don't think it's gonna change the marketplace, not immediately. There's still gonna be over a year, 2 years before insurance companies come back or well enough to reduce rates. So I do see insurance reforms a big issue for next year.
I think just the last thing we're going to do to expand upon our overarching goals, and sometimes it's not about the number of bills, as you see, that gets to the governor that you can take credit for, but we'll continue to co-sponsor and support and negotiate where there's unintended consequences that could harm the work of the commission or our residents. So we're going to continue to do that for next year in 2025. We're also going to continue to work on budget and policies that can help increase site eligibility. That definitely continues to be a concern, to try to unlock some more sites to be used for homeless shelters and increase the supply of more affordable housing. And I think overall we'll continue to always engage the delegation. Even the presentation this morning, I thought this would be great if we can make sure every senator and assembly member and their staff sees the great work of the commission. So that keeping them educated on the work and who you're serving and the data points, I think is really important as one of our overarching goals that we'll continue to not just always be working with them on where we need more money, but also just making sure they understand and can see how you're implementing the great work that you're doing here and how the dollars are being spent. Because you really are a commission we're very proud to represent in Sacramento. We always are told it's not San Diego Housing Commission we're after, it's the other agency. They're doing great things. They're the best practice. They're the model. So our goal is to continue to allow and protect policies so that there's, again, not unintended consequences to disrupt the model of the great work you're doing here in San Diego, but instead to enhance it and try to help us serve more people. So thank you.
All right, on the, just a quick question for you, as you
I think we have a couple more slides.
yeah, no, I thought, okay, you're going to answer the federal one. I had a federal one, that was,
Yeah.
okay.
I'll run through the federal
Yeah.
slide very quickly. Thanks, Holly Michael. I think we could talk about state politics for hours, so I appreciate that. All right, so I'll be quick with the federal. Now I'll discuss all advocacy efforts at the federal level. In March of this past year, President Biden released his FY25 budget proposal, which essentially keeps funding level compared to FY24. The president's funding proposal was limited by the strict spending caps that were agreed to by Congress and the White House under the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, which allows for a spending increase of only 1% in FY25 compared to FY24. Despite these spending limits, the budget would increase funding for housing choice vouchers to $32.8 billion and project-based rental assistance to $16.7 billion to renew rental assistance for current households. Congress is currently in negotiations regarding the fiscal year 2025 budget, and we are likely to see a continuing resolution through the election and the end of the year. Now I'll go over our bill recap. This year at the federal level, the Housing Commission as an agency and as part of national coalitions submitted several letters of support of priority legislation. This included the legislation that you can see on the screen here. As with the Housing Commission's state advocacy efforts during next year's federal legislative session, we'll be tracking and analyzing proposed legislation, submitting letters of support, and meeting with San Diego's delegation and California's senators to advocate for priority funding during the budget process. The proposed advocacy and legislative engagement guide, so to review, the proposed advocacy and legislative engagement guide will propose a framework for policy engagement through calendar year 2025. We will continue to monitor local, state, and federal legislative and regulatory activities closely to identify policies and legislation that could affect the individuals and families that we serve. Today, we are recommending that the board take the actions stated in the staff report and shown on the slide. And that concludes our presentation. Lighthouse Public Affairs and our staff are available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. See, your first time was easy.
Not too bad.
Not too bad.
Hopefully.
All right, commissioners, we have one comment for public. We have one speaker slip for public comment on the state and federal advocacy component, and that is Joyce Nyata. Joy, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much. Joyce Sinetta, District 3. Don't get me started on government affairs because I love them so much. You can ask the city council, the committees. Unbelievable, the power of what you do for us. Thank you so much. The presentation was excellent. And your energy is off the wall. We'll have to have a fight between you two on the energy level. I mean, but when I woke up to the power of working with government on the state and federal level, I realized just how much we have to focus on that. So yes, on the calendar, I know you're going to approve it. And I especially appreciated action number 1 under the strategic plan, priority 5, establish a policy engagement guide. And that was really great. So Molly, hello. We're glad to have you. Molly and Holly and Michael and was it Thomas? Yes. Oh, all right. I got 4 right. So the 14 pages were unbelievable. That engagement, they were excellent. So here's a few questions for you and points. Number 1, The mayor does not the mayor, the Governor Newsom does not seem to be on our side with the housing stability program. He did not fund it, and we had big success with it, which we still are, helping them with the rent and making stabilizing housing. So you've got to go after the governor to make sure he's back on track with that. I can't believe he left us in the dust on that. So there you go. Let's see, AI. Now, I know you guys brought it up, and that's great, but we're not there yet. AI is going to be on top of housing. It's going to shape everything we have in the world, in our government. And I need to ask you all to get on board. I don't know where your position is on SB 1047 for AI safety, but the Governor Newsom used these two words, which I love. He said we have to be clear-eyed and humble. And that's the two things we need, because this is happening. AI is going to be at the top. The whole change of virtual reality is hitting us. So we've got to get onto it. So when you do the strategic plan, we've got to have a policy on it. We've got to have a piece on what we're going to do with AI, how we're going to meet it, and so forth. And I don't see us doing that yet. On state level, the Fed is not taking a stand on this. They've got their head in the ground. They don't seem to want to go after the safety for AI. So, but we'll do it. We'll do it in the state of California, all right? So love to all. It was a great meeting. Thank you for being so patient with me and cutting me some slack.
Thank you, Joy. Appreciate you. All right, there are no further speaker slips. Commissioners, any comments? Vice Chair Klempner.
Thank you, Thomas. Great job. And Holly and Michael. So I have 9 bill ideas for you. No, I'm just kidding. Pull out your pens. No. I do have 2 themes, though, because I appreciate how you described how much of the work is happening, below the bill title, in the amendments and the details and the nuances. And so the 2 things I want to point out that I feel like get overlooked and are outside of this agency's direct scope, but impact us so much are, one, mixed income housing. And by that, I mean at both the local level outside of the commission and at the state level, I consistently see a lack of coherence around what our requirements for affordable housing are, meaning is public land being scored based on the number of affordable units or the percentage of units that are affordable, or is there a 100% affordable requirement being applied? And I have seen all of those things imposed by both the state and the local government, and I don't see a lot of rhyme or reason as to when and where those are taking place. And unfortunately, what oftentimes happens, and doesn't get talked about enough, is that it ends up taking the shape of a current incarnation of redlining, in that 100% affordable requirements or projects being scored on a affordable unit count end up in areas that historically were redlined areas. And by doing that, we are essentially requiring that affordable housing be concentrated in the areas that it has always been concentrated. And then in more affluent areas, we open the door to market rate and private investment. And the Housing Commission staff, I think, have been very good on this front every time they're interacting with other agencies in suggesting, asking, requesting that that we encourage market mixed income, because it both draws in the private investment into affordable housing, which we desperately need right now, and it helps address some of those long-term equity issues. But it is also like a deceptive issue, because who's going to complain when we say 100% of these units are going to be required to be affordable? It sounds wonderful. It sounds wonderful. The way that it plays out on the large scale is often not wonderful. So to the extent that, things like how public land is disposed of, how funds are awarded, to the extent that you see requirements around what those are, my request would be that you keep an eye out for the larger goal of encouraging mixed income communities. The second thing is that we often see, and we get the short end of the stick, and that we have to answer for the cost per unit, the total development cost for affordable housing, even though it is not within our control. And in particular, as I've dug into this and had to explain this every time we have an expensive project come through, and everybody wants to know why it's so expensive, that is oftentimes public requirements. And that's not to say that those public requirements are bad, but I will give you one example from a project that has been years in the making, has been in front of us more than once in City Heights, where Caltrans is imposing very significant costs on an affordable project, essentially for the reason that it is the only project pulling permits in that area. And so Caltrans is dumping onto this project every cost that under state law and regulations can be attached to the permits on that project. What that has the effect of doing is that we are taking larger community needs and infrastructure needs, and we are making those things come at the cost of affordable housing. And this is not to say that Caltrans funding needs are not real, that these public improvements don't need to be made, but these costs get disproportionately put on affordable housing. And so I think any chance we see as transportation bills, infrastructure bills, affordable housing bills, any chance we see to provide exemptions or constraints on the costs that get loaded onto affordable housing, we should be taking all of those, because it's very hard to sit in our seats and have everybody complaining that a project was so expensive and then be looking at why it's so expensive and have those same levels of government being the ones that are extracting their funding out of those projects, and that is the reason why they're expensive. So those are my two themes that none of those are specific to any of those bills, but I suspect that those will be coming up on your radar, and I don't know when and where, but I know that you are both very skilled at watching and paying attention to and seizing the opportunities where they arise, so thank you.
All right. Seeing no further questions, I'll just add one thing to what Vice Chair Clumpner said. Government should not be exacerbating the affordable housing crisis, and I have seen the Caltrans elements, and I think that this is a simple bill, right? There's a percentage ceiling on fees yep, right. And again, I think it's one of those things that there are 120 members of the building who wouldn't understand that that's happening, but I think 120 people would all agree that government should not be stifling the construction out of affordable housing, and Caltrans gets away with this because it's under the radar. So, all right, I need a motion. Oh no, this is just. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Vasquez. I apologize. No, I was going to. Yeah, it is. Yep, I need a motion. All right, so if there are no further comments, I need a motion and a second on the motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Vasquez. I'm looking left and right. Although no further comments, all those in favor, somebody saying aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thomas, thank you very much. Molly, Michael, Holly, appreciate it. All right. We now move to the final item on the agenda, and we will go to item 104. And this is a tentative agreement for the Memorandum of Understanding with the Service Employees International Union, Local 221. We'll take public comments after the staff presentation. Vice President of Human Resources, Michael McKenna, will be presenting this item. And Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good morning, Commissioners. This morning, we are requesting your recommendation that the Housing Authority approve a tentative agreement for a new 3-year Memorandum of Understanding between the Housing Commission and Service Employees International Union, SEIU, Local 221. The tentative agreement is a result of negotiations between the Housing Commission and SEIU with guidance provided by this board and the Housing Authority. The Housing Commission received a formal request from SEIU on February 5th, 2024 to meet and confer about a successor MOU. Shortly thereafter, pursuant to California law, both the board and the Housing Authority identified and designated Housing Commission management team representatives for negotiations with SEIU. In closed session on March 15th, we received direction from you, subject to Housing Authority approval, on parameters for proceeding with negotiations with the SEIU. The Housing Authority met in closed session with the Housing Commission's negotiators on April 22nd. At that time, the Housing Commission was given direction and bargaining authority for ensuing negotiations with SEIU. We then began meeting regularly with SEIU bargaining team on April 29th and successfully reached a tentative agreement on August 13th, 2024. SEIU Local 221 ratified the tentative agreement on August 22nd. A representative from the from the City of San Diego Independent Budget Analyst's office was present at all negotiating sessions. Additionally, throughout the negotiations, SDHC CEO Lisa Jones was actively engaged with council members about the status of negotiations. We appreciate SEIU's advocacy and engagement through this process to achieve this outcome. The tentative agreement contains the following essential changes to the MOU. A 3-year agreement, cost of living adjustments of 5% in FY25, 4% in FY26, and 4% in FY27. Also includes increased health flex benefits of 3% per year for employees electing employee-only coverage or employee plus one, and a 5% annual increase of flex credits for those electing employee plus family benefits. It also includes a hybrid work schedule and 1 additional holiday. The agreement also provides for revisions to Articles 21, 22, 29, and 30. That's bilingual pay, uniforms, bereavement leave, educational reimbursement. The expected cost to implement these changes is $2,564,491 for FY25, $2,207,063 for FY26, and $2,295,346 for FY27. The proposed changes for fiscal year 2025 are within the parameters of the Housing Commission's approved budget for this current fiscal year. We are confident there will be adequate funding in future years for the negotiated changes to the MOU. However, if the financial climate changes, the successor MOU includes a limited reopener provision that allows the Housing Commission to reopen negotiations with SEIU on the issues of salary and benefits. SEIU has the same right under the reopener provisions. Staff now requests that the board recommend the Housing Authority take the actions detailed in the staff report and shown on the next 2 slides. That concludes our presentation. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Very, very nice. That was quick, so good. We're going to open it up for comments, and before you get into it, I just want to say kudos to the staff and the team. You started in April, done in August. I will say this publicly, Crystal Irving, I love working with her. I think that she has a tough job, but I appreciate everything that you guys all did, that everybody did to move this forward and reach a resolution that everybody seems to agree with. So, any further comments? Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, I have a question regarding Article 18, the hybrid work schedule. What was the resolution on that?
Yeah, so where we ended up with that is a hybrid work schedule of 2 days a week in the office for all staff, and that would begin in April of next year, of 2025.
April next year. Okay.
Why isn't it starting now if the pay is going back retroactive to July?
I'm sorry?
Why isn't it starting?
Yeah, I think there was a I will chime in on this, Michael can add, but one of the things that we were, and Lisa and I talked about this, we were trying to do is, you want to create a runway for everybody to prepare for return. And I think that a lot of companies have struggled with this, is how much time do you give employees to prepare? There are childcare issues, there are schedule adjustments, and it wouldn't have been fair to try and make them have it before the holiday season starts, which is around the fall. And so I think what they reached was a resolution that because this was a big point of discussion about when, let alone the return, but when. So I think I commend the team on how they settled on this. But Michael, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And that was a negotiated item throughout the 3 months we spent negotiating with SEIU. Yeah.
So the bottom line is April, twice a week, you'll be in the office.
That's correct.
And we made a comment about this. This is important to culture. You can't build culture from behind a video screen, and I think that they agree. So, I'm sorry, Commissioner. Commissioner Lisa, I'm going to let you. The floor is yours. There. Go ahead.
That's okay. No, and so we talked a little bit about planning, right, and giving staff time to plan. Also, this is a shift. We've been permanently at home for quite some time now, right? We want to have an engaged process with staff. So we understand that there are considerations that we might not have thought of. It's like, well, like, how are we going to fit all the cars in the parking garage? That's a great question. We have more staff than we have office space. We know that. So this isn't just sort of like everybody come back to your desk. We have to think about what your desk looks like and what teams come in on what days, what unique circumstances folks might have. We know that we're not going to be able to accommodate every little nuance that everybody has in their lives, but we want to give people time to plan themselves. And then we also want to give time for an engaged process with staff on what it looks like as we move forward. So this is just trying to be thoughtful of both, the unique restrictions that we have to, like space restrictions we have to think about, and also giving staff time to plan. And just to sort of your point to like COLAs being retroactive and like April not starting, these are two different articles, so they are negotiated separately, right? And so there's not that I'm not saying they're not related. I'm saying they're negotiated separately. So So when we think about those and come to an agreement, we have to think about those, as separate specific items. Yeah.
I'll try and.
Commissioner Hester.
Thank you. I think the value of this is the fact that, our employees of the Housing Commission has a voice and an employer who listens and reaches an agreement that's amicable to everyone, that makes our working situation here and the services we're providing to our client more meaningful. So thank you, Lisa, for your leadership in this, and Mike for negotiating a contract, and congratulations to SEIU 521 for winning a contract that's acceptable to them.
Further comments, questions? All right. Oh.
I was going to move.
Okay.
She's going to get ahead this time.
We have a motion by Commissioner Vasquez. We need a second. Second by Commissioner Hester. Okay. Seeing no further comments, again, as we vote on this, congratulations to the team. And as we always say, we appreciate every single member of the Housing Commission team, members of 221, the executive staff, everybody, because you all have a tough job, but you do a fantastic job with a smile. All right, all those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. And that concludes all of the items for today's San Diego Housing Commission. I think we have a closed session. So for the regular agenda, we're finished. We are now going to go into closed session. And for my fellow commissioners, it's not a long closed session, so bear with us. And after we clear the room, we will get started. 2 minutes. All right, this is Mitch Mitchell, Chair of the San Diego Housing Commission Board of Commissioners, and the board has concluded its closed session and is reconvening at 11:16 a.m. Housing Commission General Counsel Walter Spath will announce any actions that the board took in closed session. Walter?
The Housing Commission Board met in closed session and gave direction to council on the items noticed on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Walter. This concludes the board meeting for today, and the meeting is now officially adjourned at 11:16 a.m. Thank you to my fellow commissioners for getting through this, and I'll see you at the next meeting.